Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. Yes, my name is William Wolf. I'm your host today. I have a great guest today. He's been on before, Devin Spear. Devin, how are you doing?
I'm great, Bill. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Great. Devin, thank you again for being here. I'm going to give you a brief bio. You were born and raised in New York. You lived in Israel for 10 years. You have a degree in Jewish history from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and served in the Israeli Defense Forces. You have spoken to numerous live radio and television audiences in defense of Israel. You currently divide your time between Scottsdale and Netanya, Israel. You are the author of a blog on the Times of Israel and of the book The Future of Israel, winner of the 2005 Galip Award. You can view all his articles, interviews, and debates at www.devinsper.com. Thank you for being here. What has the current war with Iran revealed about United States alliances in the Middle East?
I think one of the important things that we in the United States have learned from this war is who our real friends are. And we've discovered that a lot of the people whom we have been calling allies were not allies in the sense that they would do anything for us, but really people who wanted us to do something for them. So, for example, Turkey, which is a NATO member, refused to let us use our large air base in Turkey to attack Iran, which would have been very convenient. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, the Gulf states, who we call our allies, refused to let us use their airspace, refused to let us use not only their bases, but our own bases, which we have there and pay a lot of money to upkeep. And this is despite the fact that they themselves were being attacked by Iran with hundreds and thousands of drones, of ballistic missiles. So part of our use of our base would be to defend their airspace, and yet they refuse to do that. And so the question now arises as to going forward, are these really allies and why we should maintain bases there? And a suggestion has been made that we should close those bases and perhaps open bases in Israel instead.
Well, you know, Arabs traditionally do not get along with Persians, which is Iran, and I'm very glad about the schism between the two. But I am surprised that, given the fact that they've been attacked directly by Iran, they're not more cooperative with the United States and Israel. However, I think Saudi Arabia does allow Israel to overfly its territory to go after Iran, doesn't it?
In the end, Saudi Arabia relented and allowed us to use one base, but the others did not. And they did not do that for the first month or so, at least.
Okay. Have these countries been shooting down Iranian drones and missiles? And if so, how are they doing that?
Well, yes, they have been shooting down Iranian drones and missiles in their own airspace, but they have not, as I said, allowed the United States to take offensive action against Iran, nor have they taken any sort of offensive action. So in other words, they're not fighting with us the way that Israel is fighting with us. And
go ahead.
And so that, again, just brings up the question as why we need to have bases in these countries if we can't use them when we're at war.
Do you have any idea why Iran would be attacking these Arab countries when basically they were allied together before this war?
They weren't exactly allied, but they weren't. They tried to sort of walk a middle line between the United States and Iran. They weren't exactly allies of Iran because, as you said, they're Shiite and these countries are Sunni, and there's antipathy between them. The reason that Iran attacked those countries is because they thought that if they closed the Strait of Hormuz and attacked those countries would put pressure on the United States to stop the war. The goal of the Iranian regime is to survive and stop the war at all costs.
Now, some of those countries are not dependent on the Strait of Hormuz because they're south of it, correct?
Not exactly. All those that we've listed are. There are pipelines that Saudi Arabia has across the desert to empty oil into the Red Sea, but right now they're mostly all in the Strait of Hormuz. I didn't mention Oman, which is on the other side. But all the countries I mentioned, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, all are basically in the Strait of Hormuz. And so they thought that the United States would be pressured to stop the war by its allies. And we did not stop the war. And on the contrary, not only did these countries not pressure us to stop the war, they have been demanding that the United States finish with the regime in Iran. Even more than Israel, They are now very anxious that the United States do it. But the point is they want the United States to do it. They're not going to do it.
Well, the United States has been working very diligently, I think, to actually finish the war. There's very little left of a lot of the military equipment of Iran. And let's be clear, the word is not Iran for the title of the country. It's called the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think it's very important to keep reminding ourselves it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. And you mentioned the Shia-Sunni divide, which, to me, thank God it's existed since the death of Muhammad, because if they had been united all these years, we'd even be in more trouble. So,
well, let me just say that they are united when it's against the West. In other words, whatever rivalries they have within each other, they are united when it comes to us. I would just reiterate, these are not allies. An ally is not someone who you protect. An ally is someone who will also come to your defense.
Why did President Trump call our European and Asian allies' refusal to help us open the Straits of Hormuz shocking and cowardly? As a matter of fact, the United States doesn't really need the Strait of Hormuz for oil. We have our own. They're the ones that are more dependent, yet they are being shocking and cowardly about it.
Well, you've answered your own question. That's exactly why, because they need the oil, and we're a net exporter of oil, and he naturally assumed that they would cooperate in opening the straits or in helping keeping them open, and they've all refused. So in a Truth Social post, Trump, he called out also Japan, Australia, and South Korea, our allies in Asia, who also refused to do anything, and they all are dependent 80% on oil from the Straits of Hormuz. So he had a meeting with Senator Lindsey Graham about this, and afterwards Graham came out and said, quote, "The repercussions of providing little assistance to keep the Straits of Hormuz functioning are going to be wide and deep for Europe and America."
You know, I hate to say it, but going back to my childhood, this reminds me of the Little Red Hen, if you recall that. I don't know if you're.
No, I don't know that.
Okay, look it up sometime. It's where nobody wants to help, but then they want to eat what she produces.
Oh, yes, okay.
All right, but anyway,
that's
I was
good.
just thinking of the Little Red Hen.
Yeah.
Anyway, why did President Trump recently single out France as very unhelpful and suggested that if France and other European countries need fuel from the Strait of Hormuz, they should go get it themselves? I love that idea, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, I like when he said that. So French President Emmanuel Macron, he said, quote, France would never take part in operations to open or free the Strait of Hormuz in the current context. And France closed her airspace to us. Not only didn't let us use our bases, but wouldn't let us fly over. And Spain did the same thing, which is also a NATO member, and said that we could not use our airspace even to resupply Israel. Now, this is despite the fact that on March 1st, an Iranian drone attacked a French naval base in Abu Dhabi and killed a French officer and wounded 6 others. And President Trump, as you said, called them very unhelpful. And Israel has drawn similar conclusions about France not being a reliable ally. And so on March 31st, the Ministry of Defense in Israel announced that they are ending all military contracts with France, and due to her persistent hostility towards Israel since the October 7th massacre. They just feel France is not a reliable ally, and we can't do business with them.
Have you ever heard the expression, going to war without France is like forgetting your accordion? I don't know if you've ever heard that.
No.
I'm paraphrasing something I've heard before. I did not make that up. Okay, Devin, tell us, what about the UK, United Kingdom, which has traditionally been our closest European ally? What about them not really helping?
Well, unfortunately, they haven't been any better. British Prime Minister Starmer said that the UK would be, quote, taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies. We will not be drawn into the wider war. But this isn't true, because the Iranians attacked a British base on Cyprus. That is British sovereign territory, and neither Britain nor NATO responded.
Okay. It seems like United Kingdom wants to let us do all the heavy lifting, as does the other European countries. What's shocking to me is that we've paid for bases on some of these countries, and they won't even let the U.S. use them in this war. For instance, flying from Kansas to Iran to drop the bombs when they could have been flying from Spain to drop the bombs, which would have been so much closer,
Turkey.
So much easier.
Or Turkey, which is next door. If you would look at the route of our planes taking, they have to go through the Straits of Gibraltar and then through the Mediterranean and all the way to the Middle East, because we cannot fly over all these Western European countries.
And, of course, Turkey is very, very anti-Israel. There's no question about that. I've stopped buying apricots for that reason. I'm being facetious in a way, but I don't know what else I can do against Turkey except stop buying their products.
Well, President Trump claims that he's friendly with Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, but I think it was a question of keeping your friends close and your enemies even closer. He was trying to control him, but I think he realizes now, if he didn't already before, that he's absolutely not a reliable ally. And even when the Iranians shot ballistic missiles at Turkey, they called on us to shoot them down. Turkey has a big army. They have all kinds of equipment from us, but they wouldn't even shoot them down themselves. We have to shoot down missiles attacking Turkey, but they won't let us use our base there.
To me, it's amazing. I'm just wondering what Trump can do in retaliation against these so-called allies, which could have been so helpful in terms of allowing Israel and the United States to use certain airspace and bases.
Well, we'll talk about later on exactly what will be the future of NATO, because I think that's very relevant.
Okay. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte issued a statement saying that the alliance is not itself involved. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said, "This is not our war. We have not started it." Are they correct? Why should NATO get involved? I think the answer is obvious, but why don't you go ahead and explain?
Well, the core commitment of NATO is Article 5, which says that any attack on any NATO member is attack on all. So aside from the Iranian attacks I mentioned on Turkey, on the British base in Cyprus, on the French base in Iraq, they have also attacked Italian base in Iraq, killed Italian soldiers. And if NATO is refusing to honor its core commitment under Article 5, then NATO has no raison d'etre, no reason to be. And it reveals NATO for what it's in truth always been. It's a collection of countries that rely entirely on us to defend them, that won't spend money on their own defense, but they won't protect each other or even themselves.
Okay. There's got to be something to be done about that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They want everything. They don't want to give anything back. And we're going to get into it, obviously. So what does that portend? What does it mean for the future of NATO?
Well, recently, President Trump said that the United States no longer needs to remain in NATO. And he said, we've always been there for them, but now, given their behavior, I don't think we need to be there for them. Why should we be there for them where they're not there for us? And so he's asking the same question you're asking. And Secretary of State Pete Hegseth said, U.S. did the heavy lifting on behalf of the free world, and he asked that our allies now step up and assist with the Strait of Hormuz. And he noted that it's not an American responsibility to open the Strait of Hormuz. It's international waterway where these people get their oil and we don't. And Secretary of State Scott Bessent has made similar comments. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said recently that the United States needs to re-examine whether NATO has, quote, become a one-way street where America is simply in a position to defend Europe, but when we need the help of our allies, they're going to deny us basing rights and they're going to deny us overflight. So I think this has always been true. NATO has never come to our defense, and we have come to their defense many times, and we came to the defense of Europe in World War II and in the Cold War and in World War I, and we shed a lot of American blood and treasure doing that. They have never been there for us, but now it's open for everyone to see.
It'll certainly be interesting what Trump's going to do now and before the end of his term. Devin, I've got a couple of calls here. Let's take them now if we can. Bruce from Scottsdale, go ahead. What's your question?
Hi, Devin. Thank you very much for coming on to the radio today. How would you assess the likelihood of a wider regional war in the next 12 months, and what are the most probable escalation triggers? And I'll hang up and I'll listen to it on the radio, your response. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce. I don't know how the war could be much wider than it is. It includes Iran, all the Gulf states, Israel, Turkey to some extent. So as far as a regional war, I think everybody's more or less involved. If you mean a world war where the Chinese or the Russians get involved, that's another story. And I think people wondered if China would get involved since they get a lot of oil from the Persian Gulf. But they're pragmatists. And in fact, they've been pressuring Iran to calm down and open the straits because this is hurting them. So the Iranians miscalculated regarding the reaction of the Gulf states, and they miscalculated regarding the reaction of China. And I don't think Russia is going to challenge the United States. So I don't think the war will widen, and it may or may not continue. We may just rely on the embargo, which is very effective and will hurt them more than further bombing. But I don't think the war in the Middle East can widen any further. They have not been holding any punches. They have launched thousands of missiles, thousands of drones on Israel, on Kuwait, on Qatar, which was an ally of theirs, on all these countries. They're launching everything they can. The reason they haven't launched more is that we have complete air superiority over Iran, and as soon as they're ready to launch, we're taking out whatever comes up above the ground. So they're doing the worst that they can do, and they can't do more than that.
I think Russia's got more than its hands full with the
Right.
situation with Ukraine, so I can't imagine Russia wants to get further involved.
And doesn't have the ability to project power into the Middle East
No,
anyway.
absolutely not. And China's another thing. They obviously need the oil, and the U.S. doesn't. So I think we're in a very strong position regarding China.
Right, but they're not going to break the blockade. They're going to pressure Iran to open the Straits of Hormuz. They're not going to challenge us.
Right, exactly. Okay, and another caller, Rick in Scottsdale. Go ahead. We got Scottsdale Day today. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks very much. It's a fact that the European/NATO countries were not willing to help the United States until the very end. I think Starmer at the end was willing to let U.S. use bases. Spain, absolutely nothing. Now, do you think this is because of their moral conviction that war is bad no matter what, or do you think maybe the socialization of Europe has become something that is opposed to anything the U.S. might do? And comment also on, it's very interesting that one or two of the Eastern European countries, former Soviet countries, were willing to help. That's unbelievable. I'll take my answer offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of good points you made. So let's start with the Eastern Europeans. You're right. It's not all of Europe that wasn't willing to cooperate. It's basically our major allies in Western Europe, Spain, France, England, Germany. Greece was willing to help and let us use bases. Finland and Sweden were willing to help. All the Eastern countries are on board, and it may be that that's where we shift our emphasis in NATO in the future because they're reliable. They're worried about the Russians, and yes, it's not all of Europe. Now, as to why the Europeans act this way, to be honest with you, that's been European history since time immemorial. When the Huns came in, Romans would pay them off tribute, so they'd go away for another year, and then they'd come back and raid, and they would pay them off again. When the Germans came into Paris, the French didn't do anything. It was up to us to do something. In the Cold War, it was us who had to protect them. This has been the history of Europe forever. And this isn't, I don't think it's any sort of moral issue for them. They all condemned Israel for the war in Gaza and casualties there, and yet they were all silent about Iranian massacre of 30, 40,000 of their own people in one night. They're all silent about the massacre of Christians in Nigeria. They're all silent about the massacre of Christians in Syria recently. So their morality is selective, and basically they don't want to do anything to protect themselves. To put it bluntly, they're fat, lazy, and happy, and they want us to do the heavy lifting.
Okay, thanks for that call. Rob, you're on the air. What's your question?
Thank you. Your host or your guest hasn't said anything about the illegal invasion of Europe allowed by the politicians in the hierarchy there affecting the actions, political actions, Europe, nor the Democrats allowing the illegal invasion of Islamists and leftists in this country, which affects our political actions. So I'd like his comment on that.
All right. Thanks for that question, Rob.
That's a very good question, Rob. So you're right. I did leave that out. And I think the large Muslim majority in certain cities in Europe or large minority in some cities does affect the politicians in Europe and has affected their, for example, refusal to fight against this anti-Semitism that's all pervaded all over Europe and makes them more hostile to the United States and to Israel. And I think that's true. They have to worry about these voters, and these immigrants have also influenced the left, and so you have this strange red-green alliance. You have the left, the far left, the woke left, and you have the radical jihadists, and somehow they're allied to each other, even though their interests and their views are directly antithetical to each other.
You know, what's interesting is you get the leftists in this country supporting Iran. Some of them, they hang homosexuals, they beat women who don't wear their hijab properly.
Right.
I mean, it's the antithesis of what you would think they would want. For instance, can you have a gay rights parade in anywhere in the Middle East except in Israel? In Israel, they can have it, no problem. Try to do that in Iran. Try to do that in Iraq. Try to do that in Gaza. You'll find a lot of dead people right away.
Can you have a woman in any position of authority in any of these countries? Israel's had women prime ministers, women everything. No, women are second-class citizens, as are infidels. So you're right, Rob. That is a factor, but I think it may not be as much of a factor as the fact that the Europeans are just lazy and as long as we were willing to do the dirty work for them, as long as we were willing to die to defend them and pay to defend them, they figured why not. And so Trump has finally drawn a line, as it should have been drawn decades ago, and he said no more.
Okay. Let's talk about the current war with Iran. What has it revealed about our U.S. alliance with Israel? I think that's a very important question.
Yeah, so in all this bleak picture of our alliances, where many of our so-called allies have shown themselves to be not allies, the one bright spot has been Israel, because Israel has shown that not only it is absolutely willing to fight with us shoulder to shoulder, but it's highly capable. Some of these countries in Europe, even had they agreed to fight with us, they've let their armies deteriorate to the point that they're not worth too much. The British Navy was once a factor. The British Navy is nothing today, and their ground forces in Europe are very small. And Israel, on the other hand, has shown that it's willing to help us. For example, when the Gulf countries closed their airspace to us, Israel allowed us to land in Israeli bases. In a lot of the flights to Iran were coming from Israel. It was Israel that decapitated the Iranian regime in the first minute of the conflict. It was Israel that killed Ali Khamenei and the entire leadership. And it's Israel that's provided real on-the-ground intelligence, because the Mossad is very embedded in Iran, and we also have a lot of influence with the ethnic minorities there, like the Azeris and the Kurds, and with neighboring countries like Georgia and Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. So Israel has shown itself to be a willing and able ally and has been a big asset to us in this war.
Okay, thank you for that question. We have another caller, Aiden from Phoenix. Go ahead. What's your question?
To what level of success is Israel achieved against Hezbollah? And I'll take my answer off the air.
All right, thanks for that question. That's a good one.
That's a really good question. It's a whole nother show on Lebanon, but it's a very good question. So Israel has destroyed much of what Hezbollah's infrastructure was, killed off all of its leadership, but you have to understand Lebanon. Lebanon is like a feudal patchwork of feuding groups and religions. There's the Shiites and the Sunni and the Maronite Christian and the Greek Orthodox, and they're all at each other's throats and always have been. And the Shiites, who are about 40% of Lebanese, their militia is Hezbollah. And all these groups have militias. And you don't survive in Lebanon without an armed militia, because it's a failed state. And Hezbollah will always be there because the Shiites are there. And as long as the Shiites are there, you're going to have Hezbollah. And the answer to that is to push them away from the border, which Israel to some extent has done, and destroyed all the Shiite villages along the border. Because if the Shiites come back, as we've learned in 3 previous wars, then Hezbollah comes back. I think Israel needs to go to the Litani River, which is a more defensible border. But so far, they've just taken a strip along the border, and that's their solution. There is no way to rid Lebanon of Hezbollah as long as there are Shiites in Hezbollah. That's just the reality.
All right, thanks for that great question, Iden. Let's go to Andy calling from Payson, Arizona. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Spear, it's a real pleasure to speak with you. I've read your book, The Future of Israel, and I recommend that all of the listeners get a hold of a copy and read it right away. But what I wanted to ask is you have a chapter in there where you recommend that Judaism in general spend more attention on proselytization. I know the 2 junior Abrahamic religions put a lot of effort into proselytization. I'm a Christian myself, and we proselytize like crazy all the time. And I wonder if you're getting any traction in the Jewish community on that idea. It seems to me like a great idea, but what do I know? And I will take my answer off the air. Thank you.
And I would weave into the question and the answer: why Christians have 2 billion people and Jews have 15 million in the whole world?
Well, thank you for the question, Andy. Thank you for your support and for reading my book. Appreciate it. On the chapter on proselytism, I advocate Jews proselytize. If you believe in what you say and you believe it's the truth, then you want to spread that to others. And I don't blame other religions for doing that. It seems like the natural thing to do. Historically, the problem for the Jews is that when Constantine became emperor of Rome, he made it a death penalty for not only to convert, for anyone who converted you. And so the Jews shied away from it, and the rabbis made excuses as to why it's not in Judaism, but it is part of Judaism.
I don't think Constantine's alive anymore, is he?
Exactly right. And the Muslims did the same thing. So apostasy in Islam is pain of death. And so the Jews rationalized that they don't really believe in proselytism. Am I getting any traction? Honest answer is no. It's so deeply embedded in the Jewish psyche that most Jews will tell you, well, proselytism is against Judaism. It's not. You can read about in the Bible how Abraham converted his family and the Jews converted the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt with them, and how Ezra and Nehemiah converted the inhabitants of the land, and the Maccabees converted people. It's only after we became a persecuted minority. So I don't have any traction on that, but I think it's a worthy goal, and I find it very interesting that you as a Christian also support that. And it's very encouraging to hear that. And I thank you for your support and your question.
Thanks for that question. Let's quickly go to Joe from Phoenix.
Yeah, hi, Devin. Although there's different events and we're at a different time in history, we see, again, a lot of blood libels, a whole new set of blood libels against Israel, the Jewish state. And I was wondering if you had any suggestion or comment as far as what you think should be the response to that.
Thank you, Joe, for that question. Let me just explain for the audience what a blood libel is. In the Middle Ages, they used to say that the Jews were using the blood of Christian babies to make matzah. Of course, this was a lie, but it was then, ignorant people in the Middle Ages, ignorant peasants, believed it, and then they would go massacre the Jews. And you're absolutely right that the modern lies about Israel committing genocide in Gaza, which it's not, is a blood libel. It's exactly a blood libel. Anti-Semitism and their lies have been around for a long time, and we haven't had a solution. And the only solution, in my view, is Israel. I'm a Zionist. I lived in Israel and lived there part-time, and I believe that the answer to anti-Semitism ultimately is Israel. and the Jews need to belong in Israel, and we need a state to protect us, and they may still hate us, but if they hate us enough, they're going to have to come up against the IDF and our tanks, and that won't go well for them. And it's different being defenseless people in the United States or somewhere else, where ultimately we don't have the ability to defend ourselves. And so we need to defend ourselves to the maximum extent here. But the ultimate solution to anti-Semitism is that we have a state, and not only a state, but as I explain in my book, The Future of Israel, a powerful state powerful enough to deal with our enemies like Iran and like all the enemies we've had so that we can vanquish them.
Okay, thanks for that question, Joe. Devin, why did the U.S. military leadership describe the recent cooperation with Israel in the war with Iran as being extraordinary and historic?
Yes, well, we've had a long and a good relationship with Israel as an ally. But what's happened in this recent round of the fighting, specifically the recent round, I'm not even going back to the 12-day war, is that Israel and the United States have coordinated this in a way where they've never coordinated it before. And I venture to say that the United States, certainly not since World War II, has coordinated with an ally on this level, and maybe even in World War II. So, for example, the British would have their part of the front in Germany. We would have ours, but we didn't fight the same fight in the air at the same time. In the case of the war in Iran, the U.S. Army has embedded officers in Israel's military headquarters in Tel Aviv. It's called the Kiryah, and there are Israeli officers embedded in U.S. Central Command, and they're constantly working together. Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of CENTCOM, was in Israel now, I think, twice, talking to our Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir. There are reports that there are 4,000 to 5,000 phone calls a day between the two militaries to synchronize our efforts. You understand, our planes are over Iran at the same time, going after the same targets. In real time, we will discover a target, they will discover a target, we will let each other know, and in real time attack the same target. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth characterized Israel as a steadfast partner, and he said it has the will and the capacity to achieve incredible effects through coordinated targeting. And he described the combined force of the U.S. and Israel as bringing sheer destruction to our adversaries. So we have a few hundred jet aircraft on carriers. Israel has an equal number based in Israel, and the multiple effect of that has been very devastating on Iran. We established complete air superiority within the first few minutes of the war. All the Russian and Chinese weapons that they have, their much vaunted SA-400 anti-aircraft weapons, have shown that they're absolutely useless against the technology that Israel and America have, and they have not been able to shoot down a plane, to do anything to our naval vessels, and they are absolutely powerless against the technology and the coordination that we've used.
Okay, quickly, do you think the United States is going to withdraw from NATO? Seems like they should. I mean, we're carrying all the weight and we get nothing back.
That's a $64,000 question. It remains to be seen. I would venture to say that at the minimum, we are going to shift our bases and our support to countries like Finland, Sweden, Greece, maybe some of the East European countries like Hungary and Poland and Romania, and not to France and Germany, and take our bases and our investments away from them and let them fend for themselves. Whether or not the United States ultimately completely withdraws from NATO, I don't know. But what I do know, and what I think everyone now knows, is who our allies are and who are not our allies. And the close coordination between Israel and the military leadership of the United States, this has produced a new level of trust between the two governments and armies, and that's going to have positive and far-reaching effects for both countries into the future.
Devin Spear, tremendous presentation. Thank you very much. Appreciate your being here. We'll certainly have you on again.